My parents threatened to skip my wedding if I don't invite their toxic friends who made my life hell. I choose my fiancé and happiness over their demands, and they disowned me. Now my aunt reveals a dark family secret. I, 27F, am in a heartbreaking situation with my parents regarding my upcoming wedding. They're threatening not to attend because I won't invite their close friends, the Johnsons, who made my life miserable for a year. To understand this mess, I need to go back to my childhood. My parents, especially my mom, always had high expectations for me. I was their only child for 15 years until my sister Emily came along, and they poured all their hopes and dreams into me. They pushed me to excel in school, take up multiple extracurricular activities, and always present a perfect image to their friends and colleagues. The Johnsons have been a constant presence in our lives for as long as I can remember. They were college friends of my parents, and our families spent countless holidays and vacations together. Mr. Johnson and my dad even started a small business together in the early 2000s, which has been moderately successful. Growing up, I always felt uncomfortable around the Johnsons. Their kids were older than me and never included me in their games. Mrs. Johnson would constantly compare me to her daughters, always finding ways to subtly put me down. But my parents never noticed or chose to ignore it. Fast forward to 2020. I had just graduated from college with a degree in architecture. It was the height of the pandemic, and job prospects were slim. After months of searching, I finally landed an entry-level position at a small firm in a city about 3 hours from my hometown. I was excited about the opportunity, but worried about the cost of living in the new city. That's when the Johnsons stepped in. They owned a property there, a small guest house behind a larger home they rented out. They offered to let me stay in the guest house for only $400 a month, well below the market rate. My parents were thrilled, seeing it as a perfect solution. Despite my reservations, I agreed, thinking it would be a good way to save money while I started my career. At first, things seemed okay. The guest house was small but comfortable, and I was grateful for the affordable rent. But within weeks, I started to notice issues. The Johnsons, who lived in the main house, became increasingly intrusive. They'd show up unannounced, sometimes even entering without knocking. Mrs. Johnson would comment on the cleanliness of the place, often implying I wasn't taking good care of it. Things got worse when I started dating Oliver, 29 Mao. We met at a local coffee shop where he was working part-time while studying for his teaching certification. Oliver was kind, funny, and supportive. Everything I needed as I was adjusting to my new life and stressful job. But the Johnsons didn't approve. They started spreading rumors about me to my parents. They claimed I was never home, insinuating I was staying at Oliver's place all the time. They even accused me of cheating on Oliver with multiple guys. None of this was true. I was working long hours at the firm, often staying late to impress my bosses, and when I wasn't working, I was usually just relaxing at home or spending time with Oliver. The Johnsons seemed to hate Oliver for no reason. They'd make snide comments about his job, saying things like, "I guess not everyone can have ambition." They criticized his appearance, once telling me I could do better than a guy with glasses and a bit of a dad bod. It hurt me to hear them talk about Oliver like that, especially because I found him incredibly attractive, both inside and out. Mr. Johnson's behavior became particularly problematic. He started cornering me in the kitchen or when I was leaving for work, complaining about his marriage. He'd go into uncomfortable details about their lack of intimacy. Once, he even made a comment about how I reminded him of Mrs. Johnson when she was younger. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't know how to handle it. The situation reached a breaking point in the summer of 2021. The air conditioning in the guest house broke down during a heat wave. When I asked the Johnsons to fix it, they accused me of overusing it and insisted I pay for the entire $1,200 repair. When I refused, pointing out that as landlords they were responsible for major repairs, they threatened to evict me. Throughout all of this, my parents never took my side. They always believed the Johnsons over me, their own daughter. They'd lecture me about being more respectful to the Johnsons and told me I should be grateful for the cheap rent. It was like they had completely forgotten all the times the Johnsons had made me uncomfortable as a child. I finally moved out at the end of 2021, finding an apartment with some work friends. I left without saying goodbye to the Johnsons, not wanting another confrontation. My parents were upset, saying I was being ungrateful and dramatic. Now, it's 2024, and Oliver and I are engaged. He proposed on a hiking trip last fall, presenting me with a beautiful, simple ring at the summit of our favorite trail. We're planning our wedding for next spring, and we were excited to start this new chapter of our lives. But when we started discussing the guest list, my parents immediately brought up the Johnsons. I told them firmly that the Johnsons weren't welcome at my wedding after how they treated me. This led to a huge argument. My mom said I was being ungrateful and childish. My dad accused me of tearing the family apart over petty grudges. They both threatened not to come to the wedding if the Johnsons weren't invited. I tried explaining how much the Johnsons had hurt me, but my parents wouldn't listen. My mom even said, "The Johnsons have been our friends for 30 years. You can't expect us to choose you over them." That comment hit me hard. I couldn't believe my own mother was saying she valued her friends over her daughter. Oliver and his parents have been incredibly supportive throughout all of this. They're even offering to pay for most of the wedding since my parents are now refusing to contribute. Oliver's mom, a sweet woman who has always treated me like a daughter, offered to help me shop for my wedding dress, a task I had always imagined doing with my own mom. But I'm still heartbroken at the thought of getting married without my parents there. Despite our issues, I love them, and always imagine them being part of my big day. My dad walking me down the aisle, my mom helping me get ready, both of them giving a speech at the reception. These were all things I had dreamed about. I'm torn between standing my ground and giving in to keep the peace. The wedding is still months away, but this situation is causing me so much stress and anxiety. I've even started having nightmares about showing up to my own wedding and finding the Johnsons there instead of my parents. Oliver suggests we consider having a smaller wedding, just close friends and family, to avoid the drama. But part of me feels like I shouldn't have to change my plans because of this. Why should I miss out on the big celebration I've always wanted because my parents can't respect my feelings? I don't know what to do. Am I being unreasonable by not inviting the Johnsons? Should I just give in to keep the peace? How do I move forward with wedding planning with this dark cloud hanging over everything? Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and the situation with my parents has only deteriorated further. I tried reaching out to them again, hoping we could have a calm, rational discussion about the wedding and the Johnson situation. Instead, it turned into another explosive argument that has left me feeling more hurt and confused than ever. I decided to meet my parents for coffee at a neutral location, thinking a public place might help keep things civil. As soon as we sat down, I could tell by their expressions that this wasn't going to be the productive conversation I had hoped for. My mom started by saying she and my dad had been thinking things over and had come to a decision. For a brief moment, I felt a glimmer of hope, thinking maybe they'd realized how unreasonable they were being. But then she dropped a bombshell. They wanted me to not only invite the Johnsons to the wedding, but also make Mrs. Johnson one of my bridesmaids. I was speechless. When I finally found my voice, I asked her if she was joking. She wasn't. She said it would be a nice gesture to show there were no hard feelings about the past. I reminded her of all the awful things the Johnsons had done, but she brushed it off, saying I was exaggerating and needed to let bygones be bygones. Then my dad chimed in, saying that if I really cared about family, I'd do this for them. He even suggested that Oliver and I should consider having our rehearsal dinner at the Johnsons' house to really bury the hatchet. The thought of spending what should be a joyous pre-wedding celebration in the home where I had been so miserable made me feel physically ill. I tried to stay calm, explaining once again how the Johnsons had made me feel, how their actions had affected my self-esteem and my relationship with Oliver. I even shared some details I hadn't before, like Mr. Johnson's inappropriate comments and how Mrs. Johnson had constantly criticized my appearance and career choices, but it was like they weren't even listening. My mom then said something that I don't think I'll ever forget. "Well, if you're going to be this selfish, maybe it's better if we don't come to the wedding at all. We wouldn't want to ruin your perfect day with our presence." I left the coffee shop in tears, feeling completely drained and betrayed. I called Oliver, who came to pick me up immediately. As I cried in the car, recounting the conversation, he suggested something that at first seemed crazy but is starting to make more sense: eloping. We spent the rest of the day talking about it. The more we discussed it, the more appealing it became. No drama, no family politics, just us celebrating our love. We could have a small ceremony somewhere beautiful, maybe on a beach or in the mountains with just a few close friends. Oliver pointed out that we could use the money we'd save on a big wedding for a longer, more luxurious honeymoon, or we could put it towards a down payment on a house. The practical side of me sees the appeal in this, but another part of me feels guilty for even considering this option. I've always dreamed of a big wedding with all our family and friends. I imagined dance lessons with my dad for our father-daughter dance, shopping for bridesmaid dresses with my sister and friends, all the traditional moments that come with a big wedding. Oliver says he'll support whatever decision I make, but I can tell he likes the idea of eloping too. He's never been one for big, flashy events, and I know the thought of saying our vows in a private, intimate setting appeals to him. His parents, bless them, said they'd understand if we chose to elope and would still be happy to help us financially if we needed it. They've been so supportive throughout this whole ordeal, which only highlights how unsupportive my own parents are being. I'm also worried about how eloping would affect my relationship with the rest of my family. My sister Emily has been excited about being a bridesmaid, and I have cousins and aunts and uncles who I know would be hurt if they weren't included in the celebration. Then there's the practical side of things. We've already put down deposits on a venue and started to book vendors. Canceling everything would mean losing money, not to mention the hassle of explaining the situation to everyone. I'm torn between three options: going ahead with the big wedding as planned and risking more drama and heartache, scaling back to a very small ceremony with just our closest friends and family, or scrapping everything and eloping. Part of me wants to stand my ground and have the wedding I've always dreamed of, with or without my parents. Another part just wants to run away from all this stress and drama. And yet another part wonders if I should just give in to my parents' demands for the sake of peace. Even though the thought of having the Johnsons at my wedding makes me feel sick. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and whichever path I choose will have long-lasting consequences for my relationships with my family. Has anyone else been in a similar situation? How did you handle it? Did you regret your decision? I could really use some advice right now. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and after much discussion and soul-searching, Oliver and I have made a decision. We're going ahead with a wedding, but we're significantly scaling back our plans. Instead of the large celebration we originally envisioned, we're opting for a small, intimate ceremony with just our closest friends and family. We've chosen a beautiful vineyard about an hour outside the city for the ceremony and reception. It's a place Oliver and I visited on one of our first weekend trips together, and it holds special memories for us. The owner, a kind older woman, has been incredibly understanding of our situation and has worked with us to create a package that fits our new vision and budget. We're limiting the guest list to 50 people, just our closest friends and family members who have been supportive throughout this whole ordeal. It's been a difficult process, having to uninvite some people we'd initially included, but most have been understanding. When we started informing people about the change of plans, the responses were mostly positive. Oliver's family was completely understanding, and our friends were excited about the more intimate celebration. My boss, who has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole situation, even offered to let me take an extra week off for our honeymoon. Then came the hard part: telling my parents. I decided to do it in person, so I drove to their house last weekend. I spent the entire drive rehearsing what I was going to say, trying to find the right words to explain our decision without sparking another argument. The conversation didn't go well. My mom immediately accused me of trying to exclude them and the Johnsons. She said I was being spiteful and that I would regret not having a proper wedding. My dad was quieter, but I could see the disappointment and anger in his eyes. He said I was being selfish and immature, and that I was throwing away years of family tradition. I tried to explain that this decision wasn't about them or the Johnsons, but about Oliver and me wanting a stress-free day to celebrate our love. I told them they were still invited, that I still wanted them to be part of this important day. But they weren't having it. My mom even went so far as to say, "I guess we're just not important enough to be at your real wedding." I left their house feeling drained, but also strangely empowered. For the first time, I felt like I was truly standing up for myself and my relationship. I realized that I couldn't keep trying to please everyone at the expense of my own happiness. The next day, I got a call from my younger sister, Emily. Apparently, our parents had called her to complain about me. To my surprise, Emily took my side. She told me she was proud of me for standing my ground and that she'd be honored to attend our small wedding. Her support meant more to me than I could express. Emily also revealed something that shed new light on the whole situation. She overheard our parents talking and found out that the Johnsons had lent them a significant amount of money for their business a few years ago. This explains why they've been so insistent on keeping the Johnsons happy, even at my expense. While this information doesn't excuse their behavior, it does help me understand it a bit better. I'm still hurt and angry, but I'm also more determined than ever to have the wedding Oliver and I want, surrounded by people who truly support us. We're moving forward with our plans for the small wedding. It's not what I originally envisioned, but I'm starting to get excited about it. Oliver and I are focusing on making it a day that truly represents us as a couple. We're writing our own vows, choosing music that's meaningful to us, and planning to incorporate some unique elements that reflect our personalities and relationship. I'm still holding out hope that my parents will come around, but I'm prepared for the possibility that they won't. It's a painful realization, but I'm learning that sometimes you have to create your own happiness, even if it means letting go of people you thought would always be there for you. As we continue with the wedding preparations, I'm trying to focus on the positive. Oliver has been my rock through all of this, and his unwavering support has only strengthened my certainty that he's the person I want to spend my life with. Whatever happens with my parents, I know that at the end of our wedding day, I'll be married to the love of my life. And that's what truly matters. Update 3. It's been a month since my last update, and our wedding day is fast approaching. The preparations for our small, intimate ceremony are almost complete, and despite the ongoing family drama, I'm feeling surprisingly calm and happy. Last week, we had an unexpected visitor. My Aunt Sarah, my mom's sister. She showed up at our apartment unannounced, saying she wanted to talk. At first, I was wary, thinking my parents might have sent her to guilt-trip me. But it turned out to be quite the opposite. Aunt Sarah started by apologizing for not reaching out sooner. She'd been away on a long business trip and had only just heard about everything that had happened. She then surprised me by saying she was on my side. Over cups of tea, she shared some family history I'd never known before. Apparently, when my mom was young, their parents, my grandparents, had also tried to control her wedding, insisting she invite certain people and make choices she wasn't comfortable with. Aunt Sarah explained that my mom had given in to keep the peace, and she'd regretted it ever since. The wedding had been more about pleasing others than celebrating her and my dad's love. Aunt Sarah believes that my mom is projecting her own regrets onto me, trying to relive her wedding through mine.